Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. We are back to somewhat of a regularly scheduled format with the same group. Our illustrious leader, Deena Bosworth, Samantha Gibson, and Madeline Fata from the MAC staff here today to kind of go over an update as far as where things are at in Lansing. As most folks know, summer in Lansing kind of slows down a little bit as far as legislative activity. But there's stuff still going on. There's issues being discussed. There's work being done by us and other folks around town. So today we kind of wanted to provide you an update on where things have been in Lansing the past few months, or have not changed much in some instances, but still want to update you. So first up, Deena, let's review a little bit. We do have a budget that was passed, signed by the governor. A huge component of that budget that we often talk about is the revenue sharing and where that ended up for last year. Can you give us an update on revenue sharing, a recap on revenue sharing, what it ended up at? A little bit different than years past as far as distribution model goes. Do we have a little more clarity in that area as well?
We do, Steve. So thanks for that. So yeah, the budget was signed by the governor back in June. And big changes to how county revenue sharing is being distributed. So the way the budget ended up was that every county in the state of Michigan is going to get for fiscal year 25 the same amount they got for this current fiscal year, plus an additional increase. Now, the base is what you got in fiscal year 24. The increase, which was a $30 million increase to county revenue sharing this year, that $30 million is being distributed differently than that base amount. It's being distributed based on an inverse relationship that your county has to the statewide taxable value across the state. Those preliminary calculations have been done by the Department of Treasury, Michigan Department of Treasury. They have not put them on their website. So all of you who are out there thinking, well, what does that $30 million mean to my particular county? An estimate is on our website. So we did an article in our legislative update last week and the week before with those preliminary numbers. And I want to stress they are preliminary numbers. They are based on the taxable value in your county from 2023, not your 2024. So as soon as the Michigan Department of Treasury can figure out what the taxable value is for 2024 for your particular county, they will go back and redo those numbers. We don't expect them to change very much. So what we have on our website is pretty darn close to what you can anticipate your county is going to receive for their fiscal year 25 revenue sharing payments.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, that went out in the past couple of legislative updates. It's on our website. You can go there and check it out at micounties.org. So let's talk a little bit about, we had some other successes in the spring. We had the trial court funding sunset extension. And Sam, I know we didn't prep for this, but I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, the extension and what is going to be done that's being created now with those kind of 4 different work groups, you could call them. You're going to kill me because I didn't talk to you about it, but maybe you could just talk briefly about what's going to be done on that, what we can expect the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always ready on the fly. So yes, the trial court funding extension was pushed back to December 31 of 2026. And the goal is, in the meantime, for the State Court Administrator's Office and the Michigan Judicial Council to work on new recommendations to reform the trial court funding system. Right now, there is a clerical workload study going on. So there's some subgroups. Myself and 2 of our board members, Melissa Daub and Ken Mitchell, serve on that group. We were tasked with coming up with a survey that's going out to local court staff, clerks, traffic, criminal, probate, you name it. They'll be doing a workload study, filling out that survey. And then once those survey results are reported, then recommendations can move along in that process. We can kind of have an idea of how much staff are needed at the local level, And it's been fantastic having representatives from MAC on that group, along with county clerks, township clerks, municipal clerks, to figure out what do we need to capture in this survey? How can we adequately reflect what staff in the courts are doing day in and day out? And so as that December 31st deadline is approaching, when the recommendations are due in May of 2026, we'll then be able to influence legislators to say, hey, here's the reform that we need, and here's how to properly fund the courts with data to back it up.
And so that sunset date does expire when?
December 31st, 2026.
Yeah, so that's going to be a tight time frame coming out with recommendations or data and getting legislation passed, of course, in another election year too. So yeah, fun times ahead of us on that. So let's talk about going forward. We talked a little bit about what happened in the spring. We've had a legislative summer, an election year summer. Let's talk schedule. And I think all three of you can kind of comment on this. What are we expecting from between now and, the election, then election versus end of the year, as far as when we expect the legislature to come in and actually meet? Feel
Well,
free to chime in.
Steve, we do expect the legislature to be in on September 11th. And they do this every single year. They come in, then they have, the ceremonies and meet with each other and, reflect on what happened on 9/11. So we do expect them to be here for that. We don't expect a much of legislative activity on the 11th, but we do expect them to come back at least for one day at the end of September. So we think right in the middle of our conference on September 25th, they will come back, hopefully have some committee meetings, move some legislation forward that, they want to make sure it's teed up for the lame duck session, but we don't expect much else until after the November election.
Do we expect committee meetings on that day or no?
I don't have a crystal ball. I really wish I did, but I don't have a crystal ball. I would hope that they would have some committee meetings because there are some things in committee that we would really like to see move out of committee and start moving through the process. So we would encourage it. Whether it happens or not, we don't really know. We do know that when they do come back in the fall, and I say in the fall, which means really after the election, that they have some issues that they need to tackle. They're gonna, again, try and tackle some teacher retirement issues. They're gonna tackle a budget supplemental. And then hopefully many of the items that we're playing both offense and defense on will be coming up during that lame duck session.
Yeah, because of course you have the election the first week in November, and then a hunting break, right? November 15th through the 30th. And then essentially there are 9 voting days potentially between the first week in December and Christmas. So not a lot of voting days left, even if you counted a few more in November, which we don't expect any really in October, right? We haven't heard any scheduled dates for that then. So
no, don't
yeah.
expect anything in October. I think, a good week's worth of work in November, maybe a week and a half, and then really nothing until December.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then of course, lame duck session will be determined by what happens in the election, right? What happens in the House? Does the House flip from Democrat to Republican? And then of course, then could see a whole flurry of activity potentially. If it doesn't, you still could see a whole flurry of activity or not. You just don't know, right?
We don't know. We
Right.
don't know. I mean, we've heard from different members. Some members, think that it's going to be a very busy lame duck session this year. Some members think there's going to be absolutely nothing. So we really don't know at this point what's going to happen.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other priorities we'll be looking at over lame duck. I know when I go around the state talking to commissioners and county boards, statewide septic code comes up almost every single time. Sam, can you give us a little bit of an update on where the legislation is as far as the statewide septic code? Oh, you, Deena?
No, Madeline.
Madeline. Sorry, Madeline. What did I say?
Sam.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at Sam, but I meant to say Madeline.
Okay. So yeah, we got a draft back in, I want to say January or February, and it's kind of been all quiet since then. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks ago, we received a new draft on those statewide septic code bills. We're really not sure who's responsible for the new drafts. We're not sure what their intent was. We're still kind of doing an analysis on it, but it's obviously still making moves. I do expect to see something this fall with it. They've had 0 committee hearings on it so far. But I do think that'll be a priority for Democrats.
This version though, Madeline, it's in a little bit better shape. Not anything that we would advocate for or want, but it's not as difficult as previous drafts.
It's substantially different.
Right.
Still taking a look at it, still trying to analyze what, the practical implementation of it means, but it's very different than what I last saw earlier this spring.
Yeah, so it's
That's
something we're
good.
gonna have to continue to look at and analyze and get information out. Hopefully by the conference, we'll be able to speak to it a little better. So those of you that are attending the conference, we'll be able to get a little more information. And as we get more information, we'll update through legislative update and our podcast, of course. Any other lame duck issues, Deena, you want to highlight?
Still
While we're
trying to
here?
get revenue sharing trust fund done. So, the revenue sharing trust fund, and I'll remind our members, is sort of our solution for more stable funding for our revenue sharing. And it carves out a percentage of the state sales tax and puts it into a trust fund so that the money sits in that account and then gets appropriated out every year in revenue sharing payments. Makes it a bit more secure than the current process. The current process is just recommended increases by the governor or decreases, but recommended dollar amounts. And then it goes through the House and the Senate, and they have their recommendations on what that appropriation should be. Then it goes to a conference committee, which decisions are made really behind closed doors on what that final dollar amount will be. And that's what we get sent out as a revenue sharing. Under the trust fund, dollars would be set aside and put into that account and could not be used for anything but revenue sharing. So it makes it a little bit more predictable, a little bit more stable, and tracks with the growth of the state's economy by being a percentage of the state sales tax. Those bills passed out by 106-4 out of the House earlier this year, and they are sitting in the Senate. They're sitting in the Senate Finance Committee and have not had a hearing or moved out. That is one of those issues that I'm really hoping they start to tackle in either September or as soon as they get back in November so that we can get that across the finish line.
Yeah, obviously a very important one that we will continue to be pushing to get done, hopefully this year, especially when you have that dramatic, overwhelming support in one chamber. It's hard to believe it can't be taken up in another chamber, but you never know, right? Politics sometimes get in the way of good policy, as we say around here, right?
That is very true.
All right.
Very true.
As we wrap up here, I mentioned our conference. We still have conference registration open till September 13th. So those of you looking to attend, you can go to micounties.org on our events page and see the registration for that. And we'll, of course, be once again hosting the new county commissioner school this fall, post-election in collaboration with MSU Extension. Those schools there'll be 4 of them between the first week and second week in December post-election. So as you have new folks who are elected, or we'd love to have those seasoned commissioners there because that's very helpful as well to help educate those new commissioners on what they got themselves into, especially now that you have 4-year county commissioner terms as opposed to 2-year county commissioner terms. So we look forward to those coming up this fall. Anything else anyone else wanted to touch on that I may have forgotten? All right. Well, great. Thanks, everyone. We'll hopefully see you at the conference. And next week, look forward to our podcast where I'll kind of go through a little bit of a deep dive into the conference agenda and what to expect. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.